OKC Design Tech for allowing me the opportunity to come and talk about designing for augmented reality. So we'll just dive right in. Before we get into the talk, I'm going to do a quick bio about myself. I graduated from Illinois State University in 2007 with a degree in graphic design. I have been married for 5 years. I have 2 kids. And we're currently actually buying a house right now in OKC, which is not the best decision while you're also doing a talk. So it's been a juggling act. I've been working at Clever for 3.5 years, almost 4 now. And something little odd that I do on the side, I started an Instagram account about 3 years ago, and it's kind of just blown up. I have become what they call an influencer, and just a little side thing that I do outside of my job. So what is augmented reality? Anybody?
Basically, whenever you use an app and there's something that you can interact with in the physical world, and then it does something digital within that app. So like with Pokemon Go, you can see the environment behind it, but Google Pokemon.
So pretty much you're superimposing information onto reality of what you see in the world. So you're taking something that isn't seen and kind of cascading it onto it. And so a few examples are Snapchat. Some of these tools or apps are things that you're using every day. So Snapchat, Pokemon Go, like you said. IKEA, you're placing furniture in the room and actually seeing it like in that space. And the Weather Channel actually showcases it so you get a real perspective of what a real life scenario looks like with the floodwaters or fire or tornado in our case. And so those are a few examples. So how has Clever been able to work with augmented reality? So one of the things that we've done is we've done a Google Calendar, and so when you scan the marker right next to our conference room, you can actually get a schedule for that day, for the week, and kind of see what's happening within that conference room. So you can pull that information in with an API. We've also done marketing, where we've done printouts, and you can actually scan the marketing materials and get a video that pops up with it. And so you get this personalized experience rather than kind of a stationary flat printout that's kind of an old technology, and you can turn it into something that's interactable. We've also done it with music visualizers, where when you scan the marker and you play music, it can actually pick up that sound and move the visual on the screen and have it do different elements to it. And then we also did business cards, which is what I'm going to talk about today, and how we took our business card and we turned it from being a flat kind of like I'm handing it out to you, and turned it into an experience where now I can actually get something that's more visual or animated and feel like you're actually engaging with it. And it shows our personality, kind of shows a little bit more of like who we are as a team and a company. I forgot to share this too, but Clever is a custom software development company, and that's kind of like our area of expertise. And so we have a few designers, but we have a lot of developers that help kind of make a lot of these things happen. So with the Clever business card, the goals of the project were to update our business card, turn it into an AR marker. And the CEO came to us and to me and one of the developers and was like, hey, we need to take this business card and turn it into an AR experience. And so these were the goals of the project. We were going to make it visually appealing, and it had to be an AR experience, clean, clever design, because our name is Clever. And then it had to leave a lasting impression, and it had to be a quick turnaround. So we didn't want to, because it was all going to be internal, we didn't want to spend an enormous amount on it. We just kind of wanted to explore the avenue for it. So some of the technologies that we use, so I'm an Illustrator guru. I love Illustrator, and so I used Illustrator to do the visuals. We use Vuforia to then take the visual and put it into their system, which then that is the part that connects to Unity for knowing what you're looking at from the app. And I'll go into each one. So Adobe Illustrator is the creation software that I use to make the visuals. And in this kind of design, you'll see that it's an isometric building. It's actually our building off of 9th and Classen. And so I use that as the visual. And then I added other elements into the scene that kind of play with that. Then we use Vuforia, and that's the augmented reality software that the computer uses to scan the object that you have now made the visual for. So you're taking that visual, it's either a PNG or a JPEG, and you're putting it into that software so it knows what is the trackable image. And it can even be 3D objects. So then we use Unity, and we had one of our developers that I worked and collaborated with put all of that and take what I had designed and also what Unity was coming up with, and then built out the animation inside of Unity for when it tracked it and then put it into an actual animation. So he built all of the keyframes inside of Unity and built the kind of the animation for kind of like the idea that we kind of came up with. And so in that process, we had to design, we had development, and then in that process, we had to figure out how we were going to collaborate on this project because we never had done AR before. And so I had never experienced it. This was our first time experiencing it and trying to figure out what are the key points of that interaction that you need to figure out how they sync together. And so the key thing that the challenge that we face with this project is when with an object that is getting scanned in Vuforia, there has to be enough points to be trackable. And so with the image that you're seeing here, the building wasn't enough. Even though I wanted it to be very minimal, the building wasn't enough for tracking items within, like tracking points within it, to make it like a good marker is what they call it. And so it was getting a 2-star out of it. And the thing that I found out is like you can't have too many of the same shapes. And so you'll see like this little man, he has all rounded corners. And so Vuforia doesn't like rounded. It actually likes more pinpoint things. And even though I have some sharp edges in here, it wasn't enough to do that. And so we had to think, okay, what else can we add to this to make it a better marker? And so what I did was I built some contrast and put hello world into it. And so it's like the main thing that every programming language starts out with is hello world. And so we thought it would be a clever kind of thing to add that into the business card. And with that, it added all these extra points, and it bumped it up from a 2-star to a 4-star without having to add too much more to the visual. And then these were the final results. So I'll go ahead and let it kind of play out so you guys can see it all. And it has sound. It has some really cool sound. And if there's a little bit of time after this, I'll play it so you guys can hear all the sounds. But there's sometimes even accidents that have happened on this intersection. And so I put in there, we kind of put in there like this beeping of the car horn. So it's kind of a play off of our fun little personality. And then with that, we as a company realized that there's a huge market for augmented reality, and we created Clever Stories. And so Clever Stories is actually a website that you can go to, and we've opened this up to, we can work with, we have our app, which is Clever Stories, so you can work with us and with our app. We've also have a white label, so we can white label an app for you specifically, or we can integrate the technology into an existing app. And so we really see a real big need in the market for this, and augmented reality is really taken off in a lot of ways, becoming a more natural thing in our society and how it's being used. So even some of those examples are going to the grocery store and being able to scan something right there and get the experience. And I'm sure you guys have seen other experiences of using augmented reality, like museums, and it's just becoming more of a natural thing. And so we really, with Clever Stories, really want to produce an opportunity for anybody to integrate and have an opportunity to use augmented reality. So go and check out cleverstories.com to read more about it. The presentation was pretty quick, so I'm going to open up for questions for anybody that wants to ask me questions. And I have tons of experiences that you guys can go through. We actually have worked with Ad Club, the Oklahoma City Ad Club, and we're working to do the AR experiences for the Addies. So I even have some of those visuals to kind of go through. So if you want to come up to the front and experience it, you can. And a couple other things that I have left after this are, we just updated our Clever website. I have business cards, so you can check out the augmented reality for yourself. But a couple other things that we've done are, we've turned like this city, one of our developers made this 3D model of Oklahoma City with a, creative interpretation, and then you can actually experience that and see a 3D model and zoom in on it. It's pretty cool. And then for our Clever Christmas card, or holiday card, we actually turned it into an AR experience that every day we did 5 days of giveaways and changed out the video. So it was a fun little thing that we were able to give out and have marketing for, and Tori's in it. So, woo. So that's what I have for today. Anybody has questions?
Yeah, and guys, I have a microphone I'll be passing around just so we can catch the questions on Twitch.
Here you go. Oh, wow. If you scroll back one slide, please. No, to your extra.
Oh, okay.
To the Oklahoma City there. Is that like a smart city? Like, is there any logic, smart algorithms behind that? Or is it just a visual? It's just a visual.
He actually 3D modeled things, but it's not tied to anything that's pulling in data or anything like that. You could potentially do it with a lot of hours, but yeah, I mean, you could do those types of things, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So forgive me if you explained this and
I ran through it really quickly.
Integrate it into my brain. So you make a holiday card and you send it out. How do people view? How do they get the experience?
So they download our Clever Stories app, and I left that part out. So you would download Clever Stories, which is our app, and then once you get the mailer in the mail, you would just scan that, and then the visual will come alive with our app.
So an app, like you view augmented reality with an app that you downloaded on your phone, and that app can interpret experiences that have been built by the same company. It's okay.
Yeah, it's all integrated into your personal app. So you couldn't just go out and use a random app for it. You'd actually have to use that integrated into the app that we have made for it. Mm-hmm.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
Really quick, with that Christmas card that you did, there's like a code or something that the app is reading? Is that how it works?
It's pulling the visual. So when you create that visual inside, so we created this like fox that has antlers on them, and so that was the visual. So like when you scan that with the marker, it goes to Viewforia and then it recognizes it. So it goes, hey, there's a marker that I'm recognizing, and now I'm going to pull in the information that you've kind of aligned with it. And so we aligned it with a video. But you could align it with a 3D model like that city. You could align it with an animated thing like our business card. So that there's a lot of endless possibilities with that you could tie into that experience. So it could be a 3D model. It can just be like, if I wanted to go and do this for a runway show, like I could turn a person into an augmented reality marker. And so when I scan them, it's pulling in all of the information, like what they're wearing, or like, so like there's a lot of possibilities that like we haven't fully explored, and that, like, it's an unended kind of untapped market, because it is such a new technology, a new idea, that it really hasn't really fully been tapped. You know, you look at branding, you look at logos, and kind of what we were talking about, websites and branding, it's a huge tapped market. Everyone has been designing into those realms for years. And so you look at augmented reality and it's kind of endless possibilities and open world concept. So like creativity comes alive and thinking, what do we want to do with this? How do we want to turn this experience into something? Is it just a video? Is it something that we turn an animated thing from After Effects into an experience? So it's kind of like letting your creativity just kind of come alive with it.
And I guess I had a follow-up question based off
Sure.
of that. So this data, these visualizations, whether it's a visualization or a still image or something that you map to the points, whatever those points may be, they're stored on a server on the internet.
They're stored within, some of it is within the app, but there's also, and the developers could probably, give you more information, because I'm mainly on the design side, but we have some developers here from our team that could probably give a little bit more insight of how that's kind of built on the back side of it.
And I guess I was just exploring in that, like, you have a Christmas card, something that's an American tradition is like 12 days of Christmas.
Yep.
So you could have it change per day, and you could do a different visualization. They could come back, you could send your relative the same one Christmas card.
Yep.
And then every day of Christmas, they could be like, oh, I got a different Christmas card.
So that's kind of what we were doing with the 5 days of giveaways. We only did 5 because of how much time and effort went into producing it. But we were essentially going to do one for each day, and we changed it out each day. So each day it was the same marker, and we just changed out the video and experience for that day.
Got it. Thank you. We have a question from Twitch for you. Since you are designing with space in mind, what constraints have you found in designing the experience for the viewers?
Time. I think time is always the limitation. Like, because creativity-wise, you're kind of you're in an open world. There's endless possibilities, and anything you come up with can be done. Just it all comes back to time and effort. And so we haven't really been stumped in that way. Like, it always comes back to the numbers and like how much finances they want to pour into something.
Got it.
When you did the business card and it starts to move, was that movement done in Unity, or was that an animation that you did in After Effects that then you brought into Unity?
So we actually built that in Unity, but it could be done in After Effects and then produced as a video. So you could have both. I mean, it could go either way. We chose to go the Unity route because of effort from just our team. We didn't have a huge amount of resources for After Effects, and so Unity is what we chose to kind of go with in that model.
Hi, a couple of questions. So first off, I just want to know, when you are like all of your models that you're using in your scenes and stuff, are you guys making those by hand? Are you importing them from somewhere?
So I think for the 3D model of the city, we use a couple of things that we imported, but most of it was built. Some of these visuals that you'll see with the business card is all, Illustrator creation. So I start from scratch, and I normally just kind of build out in there the scene that I want to kind of have for the experience for the end user. So.
All right, cool. And then second, because I guess Clever Stories is kind of built, or like the platform is built around the Unity engine, how much interaction would you be able to put into one of these? Like how much, once a client or a user or a friend gets one of your cards, is there like a possibility to expand an interaction with that, like a little game or something?
So you could do games. The hardest part with them is, with augmented reality, is you have to have it, there's two sides of it. So you can have it just be trackable with that object, and sometimes like you can have it lock in on that object. So once I think it's ARKit, once you scan it, you can then say like, I'm locking in on that object, and I can move away from that object once I've scanned it and kind of still play around with that scene, right? But there's also the other side, is if I don't have the app marker to scan, then it's not going to do anything more, right? So if I pull this away from my app or my phone, then I can't do anything with it. And so inside of our app, we actually have it lock. We have like a lock button where you can lock it on the screen, just so that if you actually accidentally pulled it away, you're not losing that object. But there's some models that you have to go through in that process of, like, if you don't have that object or that marker in front of it, locking it so that you don't like lose it. And so that I think is the hardest part with a game, is you would have to lock it onto the screen once you've got the marker, because otherwise you're going to pull it away and then you're not going to have the game.
So as you started learning design for augmented reality, I'm curious what skill set of design skills you were leveraging and that you had to have in place. And I'm watching this and I'm like, motion design obviously, but like trigonometry, like calculus, how do you calculate space and all that?
So because of my background in graphic design, I had like the visual side with Illustrator and knowing how to build illustrations and stuff. So I kind of just leveraged some of that. Isometric is definitely a lot more trigonometry, or you're trying to figure out the angles and getting them all perfectly aligned, 45-degree angles, and thinking through all of that. But it could be in a place where you're not really thinking about that, where it's just kind of flat design, and we're considering some of those things where we're dealing with depth, at that point. But I think it's kind of like you're tapping into, what do you want it to be? Like, what do you want this to become? Like, from an animation side, I didn't know what I really wanted to do. I just was like, okay, let's start with the visual. And then what do we want to do with the animation? And that's where collaboration with a team comes into it, and like you bounce ideas off of each other. Like some of like the car horn, like that probably wasn't me, that was one of our teammates going, I think it would be smart to make the car, horn sound. And then like, having the fence populate, or like pop in each little fence, like that's not always just me coming up with, that's, bouncing ideas off of your team and exploring like that collaboration with them. But I think, it's always kind of like, what do you want it to be? Like, because you can make anything, what do you want the experience to be? And that's, with the time restraint that we have, we only had like a little over a week to do this fully. We had to think of that in consideration to what we were developing.
So you mentioned that you have to have the Clever Stories app to view the experience here, and that's kind of a common pattern. Are there any other versions, or I guess like examples you've seen where you're able to interact with something in augmented reality without like a specific branded app in place?
Most of the time, I haven't seen like solidified one app is doing all of it, right? I mean, because you're hosting that data somewhere for all of those apps, and you're gonna have to have massive amount of that. I think eventually there will be a one true app that will be able to sustain, and then you'll be able to go in there and do things, but it's gonna take a little while to get to that place. So a lot of these things that you experience are one-offs, right? So like Snapchat, you have to have Snapchat. You have to have Amazon to do the Amazon like furniture, IKEA the same way. You have to have those one-off apps just because the data is theirs. You know, they're using it and creating it and putting that data and recognizing the marker and all of that. So, you know, we work with sometimes clients that want to integrate into Clever Stories, but some of them want their own app for it as well.
So you mentioned that augmented reality is kind of this untapped market right now. Aside from the experimenting internally that you guys have done, have you had any clients come to you for this type of work?
We have, and it's always fun to explore this kind of with them too, because they come in with an idea and we get to explore it. We had one a few months ago that we got to talk to them about a museum and being able to turn the museum into an augmented reality experience. And so it's fun, like, I could probably talk about a bunch of different ones that have come in, but I think, yeah, I think the museum one is always interesting because you're taking something that has been done for so long. You just walk through a museum. But now if I have an app and I get to see like an actual video or something that kind of corresponds with that visual, now I get a fully different experience with it. And so I may see a visual, but now I have the augmented reality that's overlaying other information onto it that just gives you that element of added touch to it that you just are like, wow, I didn't think about that. Or I didn't know that like that climate would have been like wet or sunny, or, you know, you get to explore that with them and kind of what would you like that to be?
I'd say, kind of going back to just our talk title, Designing for Augmented Reality, do you have any main takeaways as if we were all going to leave here and go design something for AR? How do we get started? Especially, I know I don't know Illustrator personally.
Yeah, good question. I also think that is kind of, it's tough because you have to have some knowledge, somebody with knowledge about the development side of Unity and Vuforia. You can go and learn it all. It's doable, but it's going to take a little bit of work to actually build out all of those things. Like I couldn't have done this without having our team to be able to do the development side of it, because I wouldn't have known what to do. But because I had the creative side, somebody else had the development side, we were able to make it work. So you know, lynda.com has resources that you can go and learn Illustrator, or I'm sure they have Unity at this point. But there's a lot of resources online now. You know, back when we were first doing these a couple of years ago, you know, it was still very, very new. And so I think there's a lot more resources available. With a few Google searches, you can figure that out. Oops.
Any Unity developers in here, out of curiosity? Okay, we'll find one and make friends with them. Sounds like step one. Any last questions, guys?
I don't know, that'll make it hard. I was on the team that helped with the holiday card. I was curious if you might kind of go into a little bit of detail on some of the roadblocks we ran up against, such as the geometry, contrast, scale, things like that that might be beneficial as far as design?
So I will say that symmetrical design with anything that you're using as augmented reality is not good for the marker experience. So you'll see some of, like, we have a new business card and we're actually having to explore it a little bit, but the new business card actually is really symmetrical, and it actually has some trouble with it flipping over the visual for it. And so Vuforia doesn't like symmetrical design because it doesn't know if it's flipped one side or the other side. And so, you know, creating something that has different uniqueness to it on all around helps that visual know that, like, which way it's facing and which way it needs to be aligned to give you the experience the correct way. So that was one of the key things that we noticed. And we also needed to add enough points to the visual. Like I said with Hello World, we had to add that in because you have to have enough visual points in contrast with the objects to, and I'll jump back in my presentation to contrast. So you'll see, like, the leaves here, how it gets a ton of different points, and that's because there's contrast within this image, and it knows, like, where to kind of pull from for those points. The hardest part with this is, like, the business card is I had to add enough contrast, and even like the brick, you don't even see any of those bricks showing up in that dotted, and it's because of the contrast. Like, if I had taken this blue color and actually lightened it more, some of those points would have shown up. And so we always play, that's kind of always the toughest part with the aspects of creating a marker, is it has to have enough contrast to know where those points of interest are within the marker. So the question was, are the leaves on the building? So the leaves are kind of a visual to kind of represent just contrast and building that. So that's an image actually from Vuforia that I'm using as kind of like, hey, this is a contrast to show, like, how points are set up. And the same thing with this one. It's showing the contrast, but showing the circular roundedness of the guy standing there. That the roundedness of the objects aren't always good for Vuforia with marker analysis on it.
So I'll follow up to that. So in the corner, it's small, but it says augmentable, 2 stars. Is that rating from Vuforia, where you get?
So that rating is from Vuforia. So you'll take your object, your visual, and then you upload it into their system, and then it'll produce like a star rating for it. And most of the time, if it's 2 or below, it has a hard time tracking, and so you'll get it when you start using the app and you start scanning it. It becomes glitchy, and so you get these kind of fragmented, like, experience. And so from our experience of testing and working with augmented reality, we have found that 4 and above has kind of put us into a place where it doesn't have as much glitch to it and allows it to be more of a marker that will be a good experience for a user. So a lot of that is testing, back and forth, test, upload, save out, what is that going to work? So it's a guessing game sometimes, because you're looking at an object and going, that has a lot of points of interaction, but then you upload it and you're like, it doesn't have enough contrast. So, and even to follow up one of your questions about, like, somebody designing and needing to learn Illustrator, like, you don't necessarily have to know Illustrator to have a marker. Like, you could just use a picture. You could use, like, I could snap a picture of you and use that as a marker. So you don't have to be a designer to create, at least on the creation process. You just have to know what you're doing after that process with developing it out.
Last questions? Yeah. It helps for Twitch, only since we're streaming.
So is Vuforia the software that recognizes the card to overlay the image?
So it's the in-between of it's the augmented reality component software that then uses that to go, I've recognized something, and now I'm going to push it, the content or data from that. So it's the in-between of the creation and the development to go, hey, I found a marker, now what do I do?
Hi.
Hi
I don't
there.
know if this has been answered already, but I'm just curious how much, because you said you had a week, so how long did you actually spend designing versus developing?
So early on, it was a lot heavy on my side on creating it, right? And once I got to a place like this, we were able to then kind of I was able to start passing it on to development of, let's start building out what that's going to look like on the development side, and so they can get to work on that. So there was some upfront for me to handle to just kind of get the foundation built, and then once I was able to kind of get a foundation for it, I was able to pass it off and start working with them to create the animation process for all of the, and to be honest, I don't know all of the development aspects. So it's hard for me to answer some of that from that side. But it was, after I got to a certain point with like the visual, I was able to kind of go, hey, here you go. This is what we're going to be working with. And then they started their process and so design kind of went through the whole process, because you're starting it, but then you're building on the experience, right? Of being like, okay, we now have the object pulling it, now what do we want to do? Because some of that is not always just thought up front. Like I don't have the clear idea of like, bam, this is it. Like it sometimes comes along in that process. Once you get that idea, you start going through it. You're like, what if we added more to this? Like what if the road actually like came in and did these types of experiences? So, a lot up front, but I was kind of through the whole experience because I wanted the user experience to just be mind-blowing for somebody experiencing it. So development came a little bit later, but yeah, they were kind of like, after a couple days of me working, they were able to kind of get going with their side.
So Unity is what you used for the animation part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And you built this in Illustrator. So is this something that you uploaded and it used objects like you would in After Effects to animate each one? So you just organized it. When it uploaded, you could build everything that way?
So we were able to save them out as SVGs. And then he was able to take the SVGs and work with them.
Like each individual thing, or like each individual element, like the cars and
so
all the things
each
that
car is a
animated?
separate SVG object.
Okay.
And then the road was all just one object. And then he kind of did a mask inside of Unity to then uncover it as it kind of went. Same thing with the trees. They're all separate SVG objects, and the stars as well. And some of that he was able to kind of, play around with that. But yeah, it was a lot of saving out of SVG objects.
To follow up with that, so you used Unity because you didn't have access to After Effects, correct?
It was more on the side that I don't have a ton of experience in After Effects. I'm starting to get to that place, and we didn't really have a resource. Shane does actually, he has experience with it, but we didn't have him as a resource at that time, and so we kind of just use what we were able to do at that time, right? I didn't have experience, and he didn't. The developer, he had experience, but he preferred to just do it in Unity.
In hindsight, would you use After Effects now, or would you continue to pursue Unity for this?
That's a great question. I think it could go either way. It all comes down to time and which one we can be faster at, based on our schedules and like what kind of projects are on the pipeline. So, I love using Shane to do those After Effects experiences, but it always comes down to time.
So just another follow-up question. Just
Sure.
to be clear, so the Unity part is not actually needed for any of the connectivity with the design and the tracking. It's just the animation part you used for this specific design.
It's hard for me to answer that because I don't know exactly what went into all of those aspects of Unity, but one of our developers probably could give you a little bit more insight on that.
Thank you. I'm a developer at Clever. I did not personally work on this project, but I've been around it a lot. So you don't necessarily need, quote, Unity, but you need a tool to, one, build the app itself, and then, so Vuforia has what's called an SDK, it stands for Software Development Kit, and that's the tooling that is a programming tool that you need to actually match up, well, you need it to implement Vuforia, which again, Vuforia is the thing that is recognizing the image, the marker, and then loading up our configuration for what to do at that point. So you could, to kind of answer some of the go-between between what's Unity, what could you do with After Effects, you could build the animation with After Effects, but you still need a programming tool like Unity to build the actual application, implement Vuforia, tell it to load up the thing that you built with After Effects, and then use Vuforia to kind of match the AR, when you move the card itself, kind of map it to the actual marker itself as far as what angle you're holding it at. So you need both tools for sure, but we just use, like Seth mentioned, we use Unity for the animations because our developer on the project was really talented at it and he was our main resource, but you could extract the animation to After Effects, but not the entire thing.
We have about 10 more minutes, guys.
Were you able to get any metrics, like for your Christmas card, like how many you sent out versus how many actually viewed the AR? And then of the 5 videos, who viewed 2 of them versus 5 of them? And
So we're able to
from
get
that?
all of those metrics, yeah. I am not the one dealing with most of those metrics, but we actually had at the very end of the video as well where you would click a button and then it would take you to Google form to fill out. So we were able to see how many people were viewing it and also interacting with it to then fill out the form to be a part of that giveaway. So we have metrics for all of that.
So we're talking a lot about AR, or marker-based AR today for this project specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have, or does Clever have any plans for projects that are not marker-based AR, like with HoloLens or other similar devices?
We don't have any right now. I mean, that's a great idea, and I think it'll eventually come. I don't think we have anything like that right currently, yeah.
Cool.
If there's no other questions, I have things that you can actually use. So if you download Clever Stories in the App Store, you can explore some of these things that I brought, so you can kind of get a feel for the AR, the technology, if you want to check it out. And I also have a business card, so you can check out the business card. It has our old logo on it, and it's mainly just kind of to show off what we currently have. We're actually exploring the ideas for our new business card right now. So thanks again for allowing me to talk.